On today's episode of the Blue White Illustrated Recruiting Podcast, Sean, Fitz, and myself look back on last weekend's visits during the bye week. Who were some of the most intriguing prospects? We also discuss the latest on 2023 defensive line recruiting, and I look back on my trip to see Alex Birchmeier and Anthony Donkoh. We'll finish up the podcast then with a few intriguing whiteout visitors, which is just about 2 weeks away. Let's get it started. All right, guys, Michigan week is here. It's on the road this week, though, so not a whole lot to talk about recruiting yet, but I promise 2 weeks from now, or really next week and the week after that, there's going to be so much recruiting talk. But I got to start with asking about Denver, Sean. I'm jealous. You got to spend a couple days out there. You even took in one of the greatest NFL games of all time, the Denver Broncos against, I don't even know who the hell they playing the other night. It was terrible. But take me through it. How was it?
They're playing Matt Ryan and the Colts.
That's right.
I paid to go. I didn't pay full price, but I paid to go, and that was a choice that I made. I had a blast. I mean, it was so much fun as a neutral observer, and people listening don't understand. Like, I don't go to football games to cheer and do all that kind of stuff. It's been so long since I've been to a football game. I'm also a Washington fan, so even when I go to football games, there's not much to cheer for. So watching that, even just the crap that was going on in the field, was amazing to watch. But no, enjoyed that, and did a little beer festival while I was out there as well. So I chalk it up to a pretty good trip.
Good to hear, man. All right. Well, Penn State's coaches took quite a few trips last week as well. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, out on the road for the bye week. A few intriguing visitors. T. Frank and I hit on a couple of them last Friday, but I think Sean and I kind of see a handful of guys that stood out to us the most. I mean, Sean, I'll throw it to you first. Just kind of when you look down that list, who stands out on you? What are those one or two visits that are going to perk your attention, I guess?
Well, obviously, the 2023 class is the one that we're going to be talking about down the stretch here before National Signing Day. And Keyshawn Blackstock's an interesting one to me. A junior college offensive tackle. Phil Trautwein went out to see him last week. They've dipped their toes into the JUCO waters. There's not much out there in terms of offensive tackles in the actual 2023 high school class. So they've looked at Blackstock. They were up at Lackawanna a couple of weeks ago with Ian Wright. They like what they saw there. They want to see more from him. But Blackstock, it looks like more and more like he's being centered on as the top offensive line target remaining. Now, some guys may pop up, decommitting from their current schools. We're just about into flip season. We saw a little bit of movement earlier this week. But I think for the most part, they're thinking that Blackstock could be a guy that could come in and help them earlier than these 2023 high school kids. So that was one that really jumped out to me. Phil Trautwein was in Kansas the other day to check in on him. So I don't know which direction his recruitment's going to go because he's been up front. I think they play 9 straight Saturdays until mid-November, maybe even late November. So getting out and seeing schools is going to be tough for him. He's originally from the Atlanta area. So, you distance even, sometimes you have these guys go to junior college, you go to prep school that, have played or at least have roots in this region. Blackstock doesn't have that. So it'll be interesting to see what direction he goes, but Penn State's certainly turning up the heat on Keyshawn Blackstock.
Yeah. A couple guys for me. I'll start 2023 as well. Edwin Joseph, just coming out of that visit, talking to people over the weekend, Miami has been that school for the longest time where we all kind of assumed Edwin Joseph was going to end up. I mean, even in my talks before he came for his Penn State official visit, I mean, he admitted, it's not necessarily that it's close to home, but the fact that it's close to home is going to allow me to visit a lot, and that's going to have a big impact. I'm not so sure about that anymore. I think there's some real momentum for Penn State coming off that official visit. They didn't get to meet with Edwin a lot during their school visit, of course. You're not allowed to really do that right now. They'll be able to do that later in the year, December, January. But just from talking to the coaches, at Chaminade Madonna, and then, kind of reaching out to people I trust at Penn State, there's a real belief that Penn State could be the team to beat there. The whole discussion, though, is really just how important is wide receiver. You only have a handful of scholarships remaining. Just they got to figure out that math. So that's the only thing that's really kind of holding me back from an RPM. But I think one could come. One other guy then I would just Also mentioned that grabbed my attention is Luke Kromenhoek, 2024 quarterback committed to Florida State. I'm still kind of digging on there on what that relationship is. Obviously, of course, like I said, Luke's committed to FSU, but James Franklin going down there on a Thursday night to watch him play in Savannah, Georgia, certainly grabs my attention. We know Yurchers want to see Jaden Davis as well. I still feel confident saying Jaden Davis is probably their top 2024 quarterback. Of course, we talked about Jaden Bradford, KJ Jackson, Smaj Jones, a few others, but Kromenhoek now coming onto the scene. I don't think James Franklin's going that game for no reason. So he'll be a guy we dig on here in the weeks ahead.
Yeah, Savannah's a nice place to visit, but I don't think he's just going in the middle of the bye week for a nice little trip down there. But yeah, they make these trips with a purpose. You and I were talking earlier about Mike Yurcich's schedule back in January, where he went, and this is before they had offered anyone still in the Dante Moore sweepstakes, artificially, I would say. But saw Marcus Stokes, saw JJ Cole, saw Brock Glenn out in Memphis. So they use these trips for a purpose, and if he was not interested, I don't believe that they would waste that trip or use that time to go watch him play in Georgia. So I agree. And circling back to Edwin Joseph, I agree with you in terms of, I think Penn State's got momentum there. Very interesting dynamics with the wide receiver class. They went and saw Cam Seldon last week. They went and saw a couple of other committed guys that you reported in your notes late last week. So I think there's some shuffling going on there with the board. Is Edwin Joseph the guy that you reach for and you can grab now, or do you think you have a shot to flip Seldon from Tennessee, which I think is going to be very tough considering how well the Vols have played, especially in offense this season? So a lot of dynamic, or a lot of things going on with that wide receiver dynamic that that could change in an instant. But I do think, all things equal, Penn State is probably the team to beat for Joseph right now as well.
One other guy too, Chris Johnson, Dillard. Of course, Dillard played St. Thomas Aquinas last week. That lined up perfect for Penn State, of course, so they could see King Mack, Conrad Hussey. Just keep an eye on Chris Johnson here. Sean, I think you agree it's not going to be easy for Penn State to get him. I would still kind of lean towards him staying down south, but he feels like Penn State's top running back target. There's a few others they're keeping an eye on, but with Devin Ford now out, Chris Johnson is clearly somebody I think that they're going to push really hard to get on campus here, hopefully for the end of the season, but maybe an official visit in December if they can.
Yeah, there was talk about visiting this month. I don't know if it's going to work out with his schedule, but that's one that we definitely have to watch, you and I. And he hasn't responded to my inquiries about that. But I think it's very interesting. Another interesting wrinkle to this 2023 class where they definitely want to add another running back to the mix, and Johnson seems to be that guy, not only because he's a really, really good running back, but also he brings a little bit of versatility, could play the slot, could do a little bit of he does a lot of things really well. So Christopher Johnson, certainly a name to know. I think Miami probably the team to beat. Ole Miss probably close behind, but then Penn State is one of those schools maybe in that next tier that is worth an official visit. It's worth a look for Johnson.
Okay. All right. Switching gears a little bit. Defensive line 2023. Sean, you had a notebook earlier this week. We're not going to go into all the details, of course. We'll save that for most subscribers, which, by the way, if you have not subscribed to Blue Whale Illustrated, please check it out. And also subscribe to our YouTube page. There you go, T. Frank. I remembered. Proud of myself.
You did it.
Joseph Mapui, though, I will throw it your way, Sean. St. Thomas More. I think he's a guy that, from what I understand, keep watching the film, see where it goes. I think that's kind of where Penn State's at right now.
He came out with his mid-season highlights this week, as T. Frank has thrown up on the screen. Big boy, 6'5", 240, moves pretty well. Just so raw, just so incredibly raw. John Scott went up to see him the other day. He's also now a teammate with Zion Tracy at St. Thomas More. But productive player for how raw he is. This is probably a 2 or 3 year project. He's originally from the Congo and came over as a basketball prospect, went to Archbishop Carroll in DC, played opposite Nicholas Harbor. And actually the production was pretty similar in terms of sacks and things like that. So I'm not convinced that Penn State is sold just because of the raw element of this. And this in this era of college football, some of those guys get passed up. You remember Bryce Mostella a couple of years or a couple of cycles ago. That one didn't go anywhere. Mupoi maybe a little bit ahead of him, but I think that's the kind of project we're talking here. But 6'5", 240, can move. Not many edge prospects left on the table. I think they'll continue to look at senior film and see if they can find somebody that pops out like that. But that's going to be a very interesting one to follow, because if he, let's be honest, if he decided I want to go to Penn State and called up the coaches, that's an interesting conversation to have. I mean, I don't think it's a no-brainer take, but at that size, if you miss big, and that's kind of how they are, miss big or miss fast. And that's kind of how they've gone about things. So a very interesting one there. And one other visit, not defensive line related, that we forgot to mention, James Franklin flying in to see Kevion Keys, the linebacker committed to North Carolina. That's an interesting one because Penn State was right in the mix with that. Ended up going to UNC, but he's kept his ear open, as many of these prospects have done in the 2023 class. Will be interesting to see the ups and downs and the roller coaster as we get closer to National Signing Day. Does NIL become more of a factor for some of these guys that are committed elsewhere or committed to Penn State? I'd be very interested to see how that comes about. But two guys that are locked into Penn State as much as you could possibly be. You went to see them this week. I know we've joked about your low scoring games and things like that, but you went to see two linemen this week, so you're not looking for scoring plays.
No. And by the way, Mopoi just got an offer from Louisville, I believe it was last night. So I'll be interested to see kind of where that goes, just because I'm not sure like what schools are really after him. Michigan was at one point, but I think
Utah just offered as well. Yeah.
Utah. Okay. Oh, you know what? That's what it was.
That might
Utah,
have been the red.
Louisville.
Yeah.
Red and white. Yeah, I remember seeing it last timeline. All right. Anyway, back to Donkoh and Birchmeier. Really enjoyed my trip down there this weekend. I think anyone who will watch the highlights from it, it's we've always known that Birchmeier is fundamentally one of the top guys out there. Oh, we got Donkoh first. Thank you, T. Frank. I'll switch to Donkoh first. What just grabs my attention with Donkoh is that he's still pretty raw and still needs to learn how to play a little lower. That's kind of what grabbed my attention the most. But when you look back to some of his highlights from last year, knocked something off my table. There's definitely improvement. I mean, there's a reason Charles Power upgraded him to a 4-star. And when you look at his athleticism too, I mean, there's if you played all these clips, there's some movement of him, playing defensive line and just him running around chasing guys later. I mean, I kept that in there because of just to show people how well he moved. So I still see a tackle with Donkoh, man. I mean, yeah, he can pull and move really well, but if Trautwein can teach him the fundamentals of being a tackle, I mean, everything is there from a size perspective and from an athleticism perspective. The issue is just he's a lot better at guard for his high school, so he's not getting any experience with that. So I know they want to use him as a tackle. It's the goal to use him as a tackle, but there's just not much there right now, that shows that he can absolutely do that. Now, switching over to Birchmeier, I just watched some of these clips, guys. I mean, he's just destroying kids. I feel bad for this kid. Number 8 or number 4. I mean, there's a couple of defensive ends who just kind of got destroyed all day. From an athleticism perspective, really what I would say about Birchmeier is that wrestling background and using leverage. It is so key to his overall talent level right now, but to where he could potentially get on the field a little earlier than what normally I project offensive line. He just knows how to use it so well. He knows how to stay low, get underneath guys and drive guys, as you just saw in that last clip, and you'll see in plenty of others. But fundamentally, go ahead, Sean.
That last clip, you had to zoom out to see him blocking while the running back was still 10 yards.
Look at this one here. That was one of my favorite ones. The kid's like, no, he's trying to give up, and Birchmeier takes him to the ground. Anyway, but I mean, just when you watch Birchmeier and you watch Donkoh, what you see is a guy like Birchmeier who's been working with trainers for a long time and who's been doing this a long time, compared to Donkoh, who just hasn't been doing it as long. Both are incredibly athletic players that have really high ceilings. But I think when you watch Birchmeier and him from a fundamental perspective and you watch him compared to Donkoh, I mean, you just clearly see that the difference of what a couple extra years of personal training, working with offensive line coaches could do for a prospect like that. So that makes me encouraged about Donkoh. And again, there was a lot of things that were encouraging about Donkoh, but when you're comparing him to Alex Birchmeier the whole time, I think you just clearly see the difference of training and 3-4 years of what that does to a player like that.
Yeah, Birchmeier sure knows how to lock on. That's for sure. And I think the thing that you look at when you take a look at these clips is not so much the fact that he's burying a 200-pound defensive end. He's not going to run into that kid in the Big Ten, but it's feet and balance and agility, and that's where Donkoh, in my opinion, that's where Donkoh really shines. Is he's got a natural athletics base. He's a wrestler as well. I mean, he doesn't have the accolades that Birchmeier has, but he's a wrestler as well, and you can see that come across. So I think that's two exciting prospects right there. You lump in with Javen Williams as well, and you've got something there. So I think it's a very good class. I still think it's probably a little bit smaller than you'd like it to be. Josh Miller, from Virginia, who flipped to Georgia, would have been a really, really great part of this class as well. But there's certainly a lot to work with on both sides. I think both you start at tackle and see what you've got, and then if you have to move I'm talking Donkoh and Williams. I would say start Donkoh at tackle just because.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were talking about Birch. Well. Sorry.
No, Birch is definitely an interior guy all the way. I just mentioned Javen Williams, and I lumped Donkoh and Javen Williams together. Starting both of those guys at tackle would be a great opportunity to see what they've got. Like you mentioned, Donkoh, not familiar with it. We saw him at camp working at guard, but he just hasn't played outside by himself on that edge, which is good. There's a lot to learn out there, and but he's going to take a couple of years as well to get where he needs to be.
One thing I'd add too is talking to Birch. I mean, he's snapping right now. He's practicing snapping. So just keep an eye on that. Do I think he's a guard? Yes. I mean, I think that's 70-80% most realistic, but he's trying to just become as versatile as he can. I mean, he's playing offensive tackle a lot too in some of those.
Well, you know, Penn State doesn't recruit center guard. They recruit both of them lumped into one with the hope that you can get a really good center, a multi-year starter at center. Of course, they love Cooper Cousins at center. That doesn't mean he can't play guard. Doesn't mean he can't play tackle either. But that's kind of where you see them filling in, and they keep getting bigger, don't they? I mean, you went down and saw these guys in person. Starting, last class, Drew Shelton's a big boy. Malik McNeil, the biggest offensive lineman I think they've recruited. And then you've got these three guys that are legit 6'5", great length, athleticism right in the 300-pound range. I know Birchmeier has to stay down for wrestling. I think Donkoh will get down there as well. So there's a lot to like, and they just keep getting bigger and bigger. And Cooper Cousins in the 2024 class, big guy. We've talked about Kevin Haywood as potential. We both have RPM picks in from him, from Archbishop Wood, who's over 6'7". So they keep getting bigger and bigger, and that's where they want to move.
Yeah, Donkoh's the one thing I'd say with Donkoh too that is encouraging is like he's been able to maintain his weight really well. I mean, if you go back to last January, I mean, he's been pretty much low 300s the whole time. I mean, that's just not something we always see from offensive linemen. So I think it's encouraging. I think with time, when you get in that strength program, they can really manipulate him and make him into what they want him to be. So they'll be curious to watch how well he does with that. All right, whiteout visitors. We're putting this list together, so I don't want to pretend we're going to give away 40 names right now. But I think one thing that's kind of standing out to me right now is the linebacker class that's planning to be here for this game. I just wrote this week about Aaron Childs, one of the best linebackers in the country, in my opinion. And now what we've kind of learned since then is Anthony Specca, Chris Jones, Cam Lindsey, Sam Piloff are all planning to be there. It's just shaping up to be potentially a very strong linebacker class for 2024. Sean, any thoughts on that or any other guys that kind of stand out to you as far as intriguing whiteout visitors?
Yeah, that's what you want to do is you want to get each room as deep as possible in the 2024 class, maybe into the 2025s as well. So you mentioned, Sam Piloff is coming in. I think this is probably his third or fourth visit from Wisconsin. So, that's an interesting one. And Wisconsin's an interesting situation with their coaching status in limbo here. So, but yeah, it's a good linebacker class. I really expect, and you could throw probably Anthony Sacca in there, the 2025 kid, the Penn State legacy. It's going to be a good one. It's going to be a really good list. I know you started working on it yesterday. You wrote about Childs. I'm not convinced is a linebacker at the next level. I think he might grow his way out of it. He's a big boy. He's just a naturally big boy, probably 230 right now. As a junior in high school. So you've got to, if you've got the athleticism to, I don't want to say overcome that. If you've got the athleticism to deal with it, like an Abdul Carter or something like that, that's special. but we will see where he ends up at the next level. But no, I think it's going to be a great list. I know you've already got it started, and we hope to add names pretty much every day through the next 2 weeks. But it's going to be mostly forward focused. 2024s, 2025s, even 2026s are going to come up, and guys that have offers from Penn State. This weekend's outcome likely will not impact how things go. So we'll see what Penn State does on the field, and maybe if they pull it off this weekend, then you've got yourself a couple other kids that maybe take a look and say, oh, maybe that's something I want to check out. So always a popular time to be around the site. Of course, check us out. We still got the subscription deal going, I believe, through the Whiteout. So it's going to be a busy couple of weeks. I know Ryan's already on it, and I'm excited to get rolling. I'm excited to be on the same team for this one. I think this is our first big
yes, that'd be nice. I
So.
mean, if we're being honest, though, we've kind of worked together on these lists in the past. So it's not the first time we've kind of worked together on these, but yeah, we'll leave that story for another day. But one thing I would say too is Anthony Specca. He's one of the lower rated guys by 0-3, but I think he's one of Penn State's top guys. So that's something we'll keep an eye on there. Specca missed, I think, 2 games to start the season, but he's playing well. Central Catholic, though, is a little down this year. I think they're like 3-4 or something like that to I guess not start the year. We're about halfway or more through it. So keep an eye on Matt Piloff. You mentioned 3-star guy. I think he could really move up ratings as especially if he gets out to some camps this year. Childs, you're right. As soon as I said linebacker, Childs kind of makes a little more sense as a DN long term. 6'3", 220. I think he could easily be 240. If he really push himself to be like that in the next year or so. So keep an eye on that. And I don't want to forget about Cam Lindsey either, because I feel like Cam Lindsey kind of gets overlooked sometimes. And then even I was overlooking Cam Lindsey for a little while. And then every time I ask about Cam Lindsey, I just get told not to overlook Cam Lindsey. So simple enough. Yeah. Anything else, Sean? It's like we're saying, we're 2 weeks out from really getting back on a roll with recruiting. It's been a slow couple of weeks, but anything else that kind of stands out to you?
No, they're still trying to get 23 guys in for next weekend. That'll probably be something that takes shape through next week. Obviously, if they're getting 23 kids up right now, they're probably going to be committed to other programs, and those kids like to keep it under. The schools like to keep it under, and that's kind of how that thing works. So definitely stay tuned to the site throughout the next week. We've got a lot to talk about with the Whiteout. This is the recruiting podcast. So, no offense to, we're not looking ahead from Michigan. We don't do the 1-0 thing on the recruiting podcast. We're looking ahead to the Whiteout. It's going to be a very, very busy time on the sidelines for Penn State.
Penn State's recruiting staff doesn't do that either when you have 150 kids coming to your place in whatever it is, 12 days or so. All right, guys, I will wrap it up there. T. Frank, thank you for producing. As we said, please subscribe to YouTube and Blue White Illustrated. Sean, appreciate you being on, and we'll have a lot to talk about next Tuesday. Thanks for tuning in.